In today's episode, I finished up my story about how I struggled with disordered eating for years and two things that finally made a complete 360 in my life. I learned so many valuable lessons along the way that I know you'll find helpful and that you can implement in your life today if you are struggling with fueling your body adequately because you are scared of gaining weight. I learned the hard way that you can eat normally without food consuming your life through these two things that changed my life, and I know that they can change yours. Do you wish you could look like you train as much as you do? Are you sick of scouring the internet for sports nutrition tips only to find information tailored to men? Do you wish there was a simple solution to fueling your body for your activity level? Are you ready to find freedom with food? It is possible to have balance between fueling your body for your sport and for enjoyment, and it's not as complicated as you may think. Can we say hello, food freedom? There's a way to have it all and eat your cake too, and I'm going to show you how. Hey, I'm Kristen, a former multi-sport athlete, a sports dietitian, personal trainer, and Jesus lover. In this podcast, you will find practical, sustainable fueling tips for female athletes that will set you free from diet culture, an ever-changing set of nutrition rules, under-fueling, and underperforming. You'll learn how to put together a fueling plan that works for you that doesn't require all the rules, tracking every morsel of food you consume, letting food consume your every thought, with Jesus at the center of it all. If you're ready to find a sustainable nutrition plan that works for you with your active lifestyle and is tailored to your unique physiology, break free from diet culture, and finally feel comfortable in your own skin, this podcast is for you. Whip up that smoothie, lace up your shoes, and let's jump in. Okay, so I'm going to share with you the second part of my struggle with nutrition as a female athlete and how God flipped the switch on me. And if you have not listened to my first podcast, go back and listen to it because that will give you the first half of the story. So going back to my first story or first half of the story, one of the books that I read that really helped me to put the pieces of the puzzle together was a book called Fire Up Your Metabolism by the Nutrition Twins. And that book, I feel like, really just explained things really well as to why you needed to eat things like carbohydrates and fats and proteins and in what amounts, even though I was learning that while I was in school to become a dietitian. It just helped to, I think, put all those pieces together. And so because I learned so much from them, I wanted to see if I could do an internship with them. So I had contacted them to see, could I intern with them? And they actually said yes. They were located in New York City. So I went to New York City. I stayed with my grandparents because that's where they live, and that's where I was originally from, where I was born. And so they hooked me up with another dietitian, Carrie Gans, and so I wound up interning with both the Nutrition Twins and Carrie Gans. And this really helped to solidify my thoughts and feelings about wanting to start my own private practice after having that experience with them. So while I was at University of Maryland, I continued to work out. I used their gym, and I just desired to be more muscular, fit, and toned, but I really didn't know how to get there. I really didn't know a whole lot about how to create a workout plan or really even how to fuel my body for that. So I decided I wanted to become a personal trainer because I wanted to learn more, and I wanted to help other people as well because I knew other people didn't know how to do those things. Upon graduation from University of Maryland, I studied to become a personal trainer. I got my certification, and I also worked some various jobs before ultimately going back to grad school to get my master's in nutrition and dietetics from SUNY at Oneonta, or State University of New York. So I had a hard time getting matched up with a dietetic internship, which was one of the requirements to become a dietitian. And the program that I did was actually a dietetic internship combined with a master's degree. So I did both at the same time. So I had a hard time getting into an internship, like I said, and that was just a really stressful time in my life. I felt like everything fell on my shoulders. I felt like I was in control of my life and that it was my fault that I wasn't getting into an internship. And it was just a really tough year for me. So at some point in here, my boyfriend and I, the guy that I had been dating from culinary school, decided that we were going to move in together. He and his brother were buying a house together, and so I moved into that house. And we also got a couple of roommates, which I eventually became friends with. So I started dabbling in triathlons. That was a goal of mine that I wanted to do since I had already done some 50-mile bike rides with my dad in New York City, and I was good at swimming. I was on swim team for a number of years. I hated running, but I figured, hey, this would be a good way to force me to do some running. So I started doing triathlons. I never had any type of sports nutrition plan. I didn't really have much figured out except for I did, bring some gels and, Gatorade and things like that onto the course with me. But that was about the extent of it. So one night I was preparing for a race the next day. I will say some races I prepared better than, for those races than others. But for this particular race, I had not prepared at all because it was really the disordered eating speaking. So I really did not prepare well. The night before, I ate a salad. My roommate at the time, who didn't know anything about nutrition or sports nutrition, was like, hey, Kristen, don't you think you should be eating more than a salad the night before a triathlon? Well, yes, the answer would have been yes. At the time, I didn't really care because I just cared about calories. So the morning of the race, I had some snacks with me, but this was a new course for me, and I did not realize that I could not have access to my snacks. So I had some breakfast that morning. I don't remember what I had, but I did not fuel again before we had to leave the transition area. So basically we had to leave where all of our supplies were and go down to where the water was to prepare for the swim. And we had to wait down there for probably an hour plus. I'm not entirely sure. And I was getting really thirsty and I was getting hungry, but there was nothing I could do. So we started on the swim. I completed the swim. Then I got back to the transition area where you get on all your bike gear and got on my bike. I didn't have any food stashed away in my bike. I only had Gatorade G2, which is calorie-free Gatorade, on the bike. And that's what I was sipping on while I was on this bike ride. And I remember starting to get a headache, and I'm thinking, why do I have a headache? Well, then it started to get really bad, and it turned into basically a migraine. And I'm thinking, I'm going to die out here. How am I going to finish this race? So I started thinking through my fueling that I basically hadn't eaten much, and I came to the realization, wow, I probably have this terrible headache because I haven't eaten anything. So I actually stopped and asked one of the police officers that was directing traffic if he had any food, and luckily he had a Nature Valley granola bar in his car. He gave it to me, I ate it, and I instantly felt better. So on the run, it was a terrible run. My legs kept cramping up. I was having to stop on the side to, stretch out my legs, and people kept asking me, are you okay? Are you okay? And I was fine, but I just, was really not doing well. I did not have a good time on the race. The whole race was just terrible. And that was really, I think, because I had not planned, but two, it was the disordered eating talking. I was just caring more about calories and not gaining weight, and that's why I didn't eat much. So I, at the same time, was still having stomach issues that had progressed from college. I felt bloated a lot. My stomach hurt. When I would run, I actually could feel it up in my shoulder because the pain was like radiating from my stomach. It was just really, really bad. So my boyfriend and I, at some point in here, had a conversation about getting married when I had finished grad school. So in that time period, about 2 weeks later, he actually died in a motorcycle accident on his ride home from work. And that was the worst night of my life. I actually drove up on the accident and saw his motorcycle laid out there with a car in front of it. He wound up later dying at the hospital that night. It was a really terrible year for me. I stopped working out. I did finish grad school, but I just was basically angry at the world. I was really angry that this happened. I was angry that what I felt like my life was going to be and how it was going to turn out was not turning out that way. And I was really rude to a lot of people around me, which I now feel bad about. Some random people that I don't know. I can't go back and say sorry to them. So I wound up finishing grad school. I wound up moving down to South Carolina to take a job at University of South Carolina as a campus dietitian. However, I was really conflicted about taking this job and moving to South Carolina because that was so far away from my family. So during that time when I was really stressed out about it, I actually wound up losing probably about 10 pounds in the course of, I don't know, I think it was a week or two, because I was so stressed out and I just couldn't eat. But one night I had went to visit my deceased boyfriend's parents who lived in New Jersey, and I was leaving their neighborhood, and there was a car in front of me with South Carolina tags on their license plate. And I thought, wow, this is pretty crazy that I am in New Jersey right now and there's a car from South Carolina in front of me. So I kind of took that as a sign that, like, I should really just take this job in South Carolina. Also, the deer that ran into the side of my car as I was driving down a 4-lane interstate as I was leaving that night probably also was I feel like God just saying, wake up, Kristen, and listen to me and do what I'm trying to tell you to do. So I wound up moving to South Carolina. I took the job. And I did actually really like it, and I enjoyed it. So once I moved there, I became friends with some people that worked at USC. They had all gathered together to do a Spartan race and invited me to do it because I had done triathlons. So I did the Spartan race with them. I about died during it because I had not been working out. I had not been eating well at all. I was kind of in this like depressed state really because of my boyfriend dying. So it just didn't go well. Now, my coworker at the time at University of South Carolina, she had introduced me to intuitive eating because this is one of the things that we worked with students on as they were struggling with disordered eating. And I will tell you, it was one of the greatest things that could have happened to me. And it helped me to realize that I don't have to track everything that I eat, and I don't have to control everything that I eat. I can let go of some of that control, and it really helped me to just get rid of the internal food police that was in my brain. So I wound up adopting intuitive eating. I basically said, I'm done with trying to control all of my food, and I kind of just gave up on that. And you want to know what happened? I actually lost some weight. However, there were a few things that I didn't get rid of, like I decided I couldn't eat after a certain time, like 8 p.m. And I even had a sign on my fridge, and one of my friends saw that and it was kind of embarrassing. So I thought, okay, maybe I should give up on this, but I just really wasn't ready to. So I just kind of had these unspoken rules for myself. I had moved into an apartment when I moved down to South Carolina that was diagonal from another apartment with a bunch of girls in there that were in the same stage of life as me, same age. They all went to a church. This was in Columbia, South Carolina. The church was called Midtown Fellowship. So they had invited me to the church several times, and each time I was like, no way, I'm not interested in going to church with you. So I kept turning them down. Now, eventually, two of the girls, so there was 3 girls originally that lived there. 2 of the girls moved out. One got married. Another one went off to grad school. So the one girl that was left, who I was friends with, she was all alone, and she invited me to church. And I said, fine, I'll go with you only because I feel bad for you that you're all by yourself. So I went with her. And at church, the pastor who was speaking, I don't know what else he said, except for he said, God will put people in geographical locations to bring them closer to him. He will also use tragedies like car accidents to bring people closer to him. And I felt like, oh my gosh, this guy knows my life and he's talking to me. It was really the Holy Spirit talking, not just the pastor, but the Holy Spirit was speaking through him. I didn't know that at the time, but I felt like, wow, how could this guy know my life? And that was really where I felt like God got my attention. And so I continued to go to church, and every time that I went, I felt like they were speaking directly to me, like into my life, but it was God speaking to me. So the church was having a recovery program that was basically a semester long, and I signed up for that. And I went every week, even though I hated going because it was like counseling. You had to talk about your issues, and I didn't want to talk about my issues. So at the end of it, it was really the greatest thing that I could have done outside of intuitive eating. I realized that I was idolizing my body, that I had issues with pride, with control, anger, anxiety, you name it, it was a problem for me. And so that recovery program really helped me to see all that. And, knowing is half the battle. And then God really started to work on my heart. He slowly chipped away at that block that was around my heart and really was the final thing that was able to kick the disordered eating for me, my poor relationship with food and with my body that I had struggled with for over 10 years. I was done with it. And I was able to move on. That was it. It was like that was the final straw for me. So at the same time, I decided that I wanted to focus on sports nutrition in my career. At University of South Carolina, the two main things I was working with when I was working with students was disordered eating and also sports nutrition. And because of my athletic background, that was something I was always interested in. So I decided to just kind of dive headfirst into that. I went to every single sports nutrition conference I could find. I read every sports nutrition book, even sports nutrition textbooks. And then I wound up signing up for the CSSD certification, which is a board certified specialist in sports dietetics, which is a specialty certification that you can only have if you are a registered dietitian for a certain amount of time. You've worked with enough athletes. You have passed the exam, and that is a certification that if you want to work for a professional sports team like the NFL or the military, you have to have that certification. So I knew I wanted to get that. I went ahead and got that certification. And so I was still personal training at this time, and I had people asking me if I worked with clients on the side with both personal training and nutrition. So I started looking around and realized nobody in Columbia, South Carolina, did what I did. And so I felt like, wow, this is really my chance to leave my job and start this private practice that I always wanted to do. I was not married. I didn't have any kids. It was just me and my dog. So I felt like if I failed, then it was no big deal because I was only failing myself and my dog. So I wound up leaving my job. I took on some other jobs just to kind of make ends meet, which I eventually got rid of one by one as business picked up. But I luckily had a really nice referral network from counselors in the area, and I started doing a lot of free presentations to running groups and cycling shops and things of that nature. And that helped to build up my clientele. So after many, many late nights, early mornings, working through lunch, I left my job in 2012, and that's when Elite Nutrition Performance was born. That is my business. And I honestly have never looked back. It was great. I felt like I could finally help people the way that I wanted to help them. I could help them better than I could help them at USC. And I didn't have all the red tape that I had to work under when I worked at USC. So in 2014, an intern that had worked with me, he told me about a friend that he was helping compete in a figure competition. And I was really intrigued because all the cover models that were on those fitness magazines that were a trigger for me with my eating disorder were figure competitors. So I decided I'm going to sign up for this and prove that I can do this competition without the disordered eating talking. And honestly, it was a great learning experience for me because it really proved to me that you have to actually eat in order to build muscle and to perform better in your sport. So I did a 3-month bulking phase and I felt amazing. I loved the bulking phase. I had so much energy. I gained 15 pounds, but I really didn't care. I looked great. I felt great. I could squat more than double my body weight. I was lifting 6 days a week for 2 hours and I wasn't running out of energy. It was amazing. And I could eat. I ate a lot of food. I actually ate upwards of almost 3,000 calories a day. And I'm not a huge person. So next came the cutting phase. That was awful. I had no energy. I had a lot of sleepless nights. My hair was falling out. I was moody. I was angry. I was constantly repeating myself and what I was saying. I was actually really slipping up at work, and some of my clients were getting upset with me because I wasn't getting things to them like I should have because I was just focusing so much on this, and I just had like no memory to even remember the things that I had to do. My husband one night asked me, actually he probably asked me this multiple times, are you going to stay this way? Where I was repeating myself, like we would have the same conversation over and over again. And I did tell him no. Luckily, I eventually got out of that. But I didn't know it at the time, but I was actually struggling with RED-S, which is relative energy deficiency in sport. And this is very similar to back when I was in my eating disorder phase. I was struggling with female athlete triad. I didn't have a period. I was way low in the energy availability that I had. I don't know for sure, but I probably had some issues with my bones at that point as well. So I had signed up for two figure competitions. I only wound up doing one of them because I realized it was so awful. I just couldn't continue on like that. I slowly reintroduced food back into my diet, and intuitive eating was what I adopted again. I kept pushing myself in the gym, and I basically resumed normal life. But I felt like at that time, God was really talking to me and saying, these competitions are not right for you. You'll end up right back where you started, since figure competitions is a sport that very much focuses on the body and aesthetics and not so much performance. So I felt like I really needed to get myself out of there. So let's speed up to today. Since 2012, I have helped hundreds of women, even men, who have struggled with bits of what I have struggled with and even more. Years ago, I considered changing my business to focus on female athletes who struggled with body dissatisfaction, disordered eating, underfueling, etc. But I was always talked out of it. However, recently I kept feeling this nudge from God, like this is something that I need to do. I also considered hosting a podcast for several years now, and I never did it. I think I probably just maybe felt scared, but I felt like God was again nudging me to start this. So here I am. I started this podcast to serve you and as a way to tell my story and as an outlet for me to get this information that has helped me and has helped so many others so that you don't have to struggle with this. I now know that you can eat quote unquote normally without food dictating your life and every minute of your day. You can eat foods that you enjoy and eat for health at the same time, that you can fuel your body for your sport, have boundless energy, feel and look great without having to worry about what the scale says. I want that for you, and that's what this podcast is all about. Hey friend, if this podcast inspired you, encouraged you, or changed you, I would love for you to leave me a review and share it with a girlfriend who will find it helpful or inspiring. That is the best way you can thank me and help me share my knowledge so I can help more people just like you. I'm so thankful that you spent this time with me today, and I'd love to connect with you. Join my Facebook group, Female Sports Nutrition, or send me a DM on Instagram, or hop on over to my website, elitenutritionperformance.com. I'll see you back here next week.